Welcome to Weather Extra. I'm First Alert Meteorologist Jillian Johnson. It's been another tough week across Southern California as devastating wildfires continue to burn through thousands of acres. Since January 7th, a series of deadly wildfires have affected the Los Angeles metropolitan area and surrounding regions. Over 40,000 acres have been burned by at least 30 fires. In almost 2 weeks, more than 24 deaths have been confirmed, with more than 12,000 structures destroyed. More than 100,000 people have been displaced due to these horrific fires. Now, what you're seeing on your screen now is some video of the conditions these first responders have been dealing with, trying to put out the flames over the past week. According to recent damage estimates, experts say the total damage and economic loss could be between $250 and $275 billion, which would make the LA fires the costliest natural disaster in our nation's history, surpassing Hurricane Katrina back in 2005. Unfortunately, these wildfires in California are able to spread so quickly due to favorable fire conditions. We now bring in First Alert meteorologist Sean Bellafiore, who has more on the ingredients needed for these wildfires to start and rapidly spread. Sean.
The Palisades and Eaton fires in Southern California will likely go down as one of, if not the costliest natural disaster in United States history at a time when wildfires are typically at their lowest point during a calendar year. The wintertime season for Southern California is the off season for wildfire activity, but relatively low humidity, very strong wind gusts from those Santa Ana winds, and exceptionally dry vegetation made for the perfect ingredients for not only wildfires in Southern California, but everything lined up at just the right spot for exceptional destruction in many cities and towns. We're taking a look at the accumulated precipitation in Santa Barbara, very close to where the Palisades fire ended up from January 2023 all the way up until now. Last year was a decently rainy year for Southern California with over a normal amount of precipitation. Now, unfortunately, in California, even though there has been some precipitation that has fallen, the problem is that there is a long period of time from April to October that typically not much precipitation falls. But once you get past October, that's when the rain starts to return. It didn't this year. So last year's heavy rains, or 2023's heavy rains, I should say, helped to really set the ground for vegetation growth. And then 2024, everything started to dry out. And the Santa Ana winds were really one of the big issues fanning those flames. What is the Santa Ana wind? Well, high pressure builds just to the east of the Sierra Nevada mountains, and air gets pushed down the mountain. Whenever air sinks, goes down a mountain, it gets compressed and warmed up. But unfortunately, that air has to go through deserts, so it gets even drier. Relative humidities typically in Southern California during Santa Ana winds event can drop below 10%, and as the air squeezes through the canyons, the winds create the perfect conditions for wildfires, potentially pushing fires all the way to the coast. Reporting in the studio, Sean Bellafiore, KWTX News 10.
Thanks, Sean. We now head out to Los Angeles, where CBS's Tom Hansen has a deeper dive into what this current disaster ongoing in California tells us about future threats.
Can I get out of here?
It's an all too familiar scene by now. People running for their lives from unrelenting flames.
We never really been evacuated, but we figured it was going to just kind of blow over. It blew over all right.
Crystal Scott grew up playing in the picturesque San Gabriel Mountains. Her childhood home at their base was one of thousands destroyed in the Eaton fire.
I'm very devastated because our families worked hard to put us here.
And while it's a realization of a dream, it's also highly problematic as urban sprawl has crept into previously wild areas.
I think a lot of it has to do with global warming. We did once upon a time have 4 seasons, and all that stopped.
These neighborhoods tucked in the foothills of Los Angeles could have survived this weather whiplash. But with climate change, the rainy seasons are more intense, the dry seasons last longer. In fact, the last time Los Angeles saw even an inch of rain was around Easter of last year. And long-term weather models don't call for any rain coming here anytime soon. Could this have been prevented?
No.
UCLA professor Stephanie Pincel points to a history of intense fires in the West.
Ma'am, you have to evacuate.
Yeah, we are.
3 years ago, the Marshall Fire near Denver snaked down a hill, growing from a grass fire into the most destructive in Colorado's history, incinerating more than 1,000 suburban homes. And in 2013, the Yarnell Hill fire in Arizona killed 19 elite firefighters who were trying to protect homes just down the mountain.
We're still thinking that as humans, we can overpower nature. Well, we're not quite that powerful.
These fires all have one thing in common. They take place at the wildland-urban interface, a technical term for where humans have overstepped into nature. A third of all American homes exist in this type of space.
Is there anybody who can be held accountable?
Suburban sprawl? How about that?
Is this in any way a winnable firefight?
No. Why would we even think that way? Winning means we're still trying to dominate natural patterns. We cannot win over nature ultimately.
Do you think that if this can happen here, it can happen anywhere?
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Which begs the ultimate question of if these communities can rise from the ashes and how to rebuild when the flames are bound to come back. For Eye on America, Tom Hansen, Los Angeles.
We're quickly moving through the first month of the new year, so with all the data in, it's now time to look back at the year 2024, which according to Europe's climate monitoring agency Copernicus, 2024 was the hottest year on record. This milestone now caps a decade of unprecedented heat while also breaching a critical climate goal. CNN meteorologist Chad Myers explains.
I'm CNN meteorologist Chad Myers, and this is your Copernicus climate change update. For the year 2024, it was the warmest year on record, probably surprising no one. But what did surprise me, 1.6 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. And a lot of that was in the oceans, you see here. For the warmest on this dark red here, warmest in the Indian Ocean, part of the Atlantic. Obviously, we had rapidly intensifying hurricanes, a number of them in the Atlantic, very rapidly intensifying typhoons, cyclones here in the Pacific and also in the Indian Ocean. So it was a warm year. It started out very warm. It was much warmer even than 2023, the line that you see here. Now, even though we transitioned to La Nina by the end of the year, we were still very, very close to that warm 2023, and so because we had so much area here above 2023, only a little bit of area here below 2023, this turns out to be the warmest year on record for planet Earth. There you see the rankings. A little bit of cool water in the Pacific, but not very much. It's very hard to find a cool spot on this map. 1.6 degrees Celsius above what we're trying to hold, which is 1.5.
In Central Texas, 2024 was also one of the warmest years in history. In fact, last year tied for the sixth highest average annual temperature, which was 69.5 degrees. That's nearly 2.5 degrees above the normal, which should be 67.1. Here's a look back at the monthly average temperatures recorded throughout the 12 months of 2024. Only 2 months last year saw below average monthly temperatures. Those months were January and July. The other 10 months were all warmer than normal. October had the second highest average monthly temperature in history, coming in more than 5.5 degrees above the normal. And December also tied for the seventh hottest, coming in a little more than 2 degrees above normal. Last year also had the sixth highest maximum annual temperature on record, which was 81 degrees. That's also nearly 2.5 degrees above normal, which should be 78.6. Now looking back on the monthly average highs in 2024, 2 out of the 12 months, January and July, featured below normal high temperatures. We did see our normal average high in April, with all the other months going down above normal. February went down as the 10th hottest February on record, coming in more than 6 degrees warmer than normal. October was the hottest October ever recorded in Central Texas history. That month was 9.1 degrees above normal, and December was the 6th warmest December on record, with the average high coming in 6.5 degrees warmer than normal. Unfortunately, it was the same story for our average low temperatures too. January and July were the only months where the average low temperature came in cooler than normal. For the month of September, we did reach our normal, but the other 9 months were warmer than normal. May of 2024 tied for the 10th warmest minimum average temperature in Central Texas history. That month featured morning lows averaging more than 4 degrees above normal. In the years 2022 and 2023, Central Texas saw record amounts of triple-digit days. But last year, thanks to only one triple-digit day occurring throughout the month of July, we actually recorded a below normal amount of 100-degree days for the year. On average, we should see 24 in a year, but last year we only saw 21. But what we did see last year was the latest 100-degree day on record for Central Texas. On October 15th, temperatures reached 100 degrees for a final time in 2024. Switching over to rainfall throughout 2024, on average we should see 36.4 inches of rain fall from January 1st through December 31st. And last year we actually finished with above normal rainfall for the year. Throughout the 365 days in 2024, 37.5 inches of rain was recorded at the Waco Regional Airport. The major story last year was the above normal rainfall that took place in the month of May. May of last year was the wettest May of all time in Central Texas. And if it weren't for May, we would have been in a serious rain deficit for the year, because after the month of May, Central Texas saw below normal rainfall for the remainder of the year. For more on how last year's rainfall impacted Central Texas lakes as we moved into the new year, here's First Alert meteorologist C.D. Finley.
Well, you've just heard a lot about the rainfall that we had from spring 2024, which definitely did have an impact on just about all of our area lakes. One thing that you're going to notice, not just with Lake Waco, which we're looking at here, but with all four of our area lakes, is this little hump right here from about May 2024 to the beginning of July 2024. That's indicative of all that heavy rainfall that we saw from this past spring during that severe storm season. So definitely notice the increase in water level across all our area lakes here. But looking at Lake Waco specifically, from the start of January 2024 to the beginning of January 2025, decreased a little bit at Lake Waco. We're down to 90.5% full as opposed to 100% at the beginning of 2024. Compare that to Lake Whitney. Well, there wasn't much of a change between last year and this year. Still 100% full no matter where you're looking. Again, 533 feet in water level there at Lake Whitney. So not much change there. But that's a little bit different compared to Stillhouse Hollow and Belton. Again, you'll notice that little bit of a hump there. And these have actually increased in capacity since the beginning of 2024. We're now 93% full in January 2025, despite how dry we've been the last few months. So that's definitely a sign of how impactful that rain was back in spring. Same thing goes for Lake Belton, about 93% full, up from 60% full roughly at the beginning of January 2024. So for the most part, things are looking up for our area lakes here at the beginning of 2025.
Up next on Weather Extra, a pair of commercial landers took off for the moon last week in hopes to explore the moon's surface. We'll hear more from one of the companies located in Texas right after this. Welcome back to Weather Extra. Earlier this week, a SpaceX rocket blasted into space carrying a pair of commercial landers that will try to touch down on the moon in the coming months. One was built by a Japanese company, the other by Firefly, whose headquarters is in Cedar Park, which is in the Austin area. Mark Strassman was among the last to see that U.S. lander up close before it was shipped off for launch. Take a look.
All right, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, inside what's called the clean room, Ray Allensworth showed us this lunar lander. Her team has spent the last 3 years designing and building it. 6 feet tall, 11 feet wide, with 4 landing legs, hoping to touch lunar dust.
This is what's going to the moon.
Allensworth is the spacecraft program director at Firefly Aerospace.
Good to send. Sending command.
Firefly, based outside Austin, is a small space company with a big space dream.
It's been basically the only thing we think about morning, noon, night.
This really is a building largely of 20-somethings.
Yeah.
Creating the next generation of space.
I think that's one thing that makes us really different is they've been told no so many times in their career, so they don't know what can't be done.
The Blue Ghost lander was named after a species of firefly. It will embark on a 45-day journey to the moon. Its mission? Carefully lower to the lunar surface and deliver 10 payloads for NASA.
So if we kind of look down, you see over there, you see that spout kind of coming down?
I do.
So that's the drill, and it will deploy down and go into the lunar surface.
This drill will try to penetrate 9 feet below the surface to measure temperature. Another experiment will vacuum up loose lunar rock and dust.
Our payloads are collecting data so we can figure out what does it feel like to be on the lunar surface, to operate on the lunar surface. So all that data will inform when we actually return humans to the moon.
NASA's paying Firefly about $100 million for the mission, part of a new government effort to hire companies to fly experiments to the moon.
Commercial tech is advancing at a very rapid pace.
Jason Kim is Firefly's CEO.
And it's really bringing down the cost and affordability of systems that once took billions of dollars and countries behind it to land on the moon.
But Firefly must prove it can get there at a fraction of the cost.
And liftoff.
Two of Firefly's rivals flew into trouble on their first flights last year. One company, Xtra, suffered a mission-ending failure of its propulsion system. The other, Intuitive Machines, touched down but tipped over on the lunar surface.
It's extremely difficult to land on the moon. It's extremely difficult to get something in orbit, let alone landing on the moon. And so I think it's extremely humbling, but we really believe that this is going to be a success, and we're doing everything we can to make it happen.
10 miles to go.
No American-made spacecraft has landed intact and upright on the moon since Apollo 17 in 1972.
What would a successful moon landing mean to Firefly as a company?
I get a little emotional about this. Sorry.
Oh.
I think it's going to mean a lot to our people.
Because they've worked so hard.
Yeah.
And to you, what will it mean?
Well, to me, imagine this country hasn't been to the moon and successfully landing in 52 plus years, and then all of a sudden Firefly lands on the moon for the nation. That's a big deal.
Also a big deal for this little can-do space company. I'm Mark Strassman in Cedar Park, Texas.
Up next on Weather Extra is this week's Degrees of Science. This week, Brady Taylor spoke with a leading infectious disease expert to learn more about bird flu and the recent outbreak across the nation. Their conversation is coming up on the other side of this break.
H5N1 is an avian influenza type of influenza A that we've known about for a couple of decades now, but in the last few years it's been behaving slightly differently. The World Health Organization's recorded almost 1,000 infections with this particular genotype of H5N1 of avian influenza, and about half of those have led to deaths. The concern is, now you're seeing that this virus has gotten good at infecting mammalian species, including dairy cows, which is moving it closer to human beings and potentially raising the risk of humans to get infected from animals. So even though there's no evidence that there's sustained human-to-human transmission, we're seeing an increased number of human infections because they're coming in touch with infected animals.
So what do farmers, ranchers, or just people that may own, say, chicken or cattle or something like that, what should they do to try to prepare themselves or watch for with something like this?
Yeah, majority of the people who are at high risk for this are those who might be around infected animals. So you mentioned dairy farm workers, commercial poultry workers have been at risk and have been infected. But this virus has affected nearly 133 million birds, wild bird, commercial, backyard flocks. But if you're someone who has a backyard flock, or if you have bird feeders or other animals in your backyard, the best advice I can give is that if you see a sick or dead animal or a bird, but not to handle that corpse yourself, but rather call the health department or the wildlife agency in your state to tackle that disease.
Is there any worry about eating, say, chicken or eggs or beef or drinking milk or anything like that?
Well, the good news is H5N1 is pretty easy to kill as long as it goes through the right processing. So pasteurized milk, which is most of the milk in most of our supermarkets, is very safe to drink and has again been shown with H5N1 to work in terms of killing the virus. Eggs, most of the eggs that are in market are very low risk of being infected because they go through the surveillance. And any farms that have been affected by H5N1, generally those eggs are not in circulation and those animals are actually culled beforehand. Keep anything that you might be consuming to 165 Fahrenheit internal temperature, and if you cook it to that, you are safe.
To hear more about bird flu and this week's Degrees of Science, scan the QR code on your screen to watch on YouTube or go to KWTX.com/Degrees of Science. Weather Extra will be right back. Welcome back to Weather Extra. Do you have an interest in severe weather? Well, the National Weather Service offers free storm spotter training known as Skywarn. Here's more on how you can become a certified storm spotter to help out the National Weather Service right here in Central Texas whenever severe weather strikes.
Skywarn is a program, it's actually a national program, but of course we have our local Skywarn program here in the Central Texas area, North and Central Texas. And basically what it is our opportunity at the National Weather Service to go out and educate people on severe weather, what the threats are in our area, what these storms look like. But the added part of it too is that we are training our local residents, our citizens, members of our community also to identify the threats that are happening with these storms and be able to report that back to us so that we can better improve and enhance the warning program here in Central Texas.
What kind of observations are y'all hoping to get from these Skywarn storm spotters out in the field?
Yeah, the radar and satellite, of course, can help us kind of see where storms are forming. And then with the radar looking inside the storm itself and doing that 3D scan, we can usually get an assessment of what the various threats may be. But usually what we're looking for is hail, usually about penny size or larger. Damaging winds is 60 miles per hour or greater, or we like reports actually at 50 miles per hour or greater. And heavy rain that might be causing flash flooding, or what those impacts of flash flooding are. And then of course, anything that may indicate a tornado is in the process of developing, or confirmation that there is a tornado on the ground as well.
Here's a look at some of the upcoming Skywarn classes across Central Texas before our 2025 severe storm season arrives. Make sure to check out the National Weather Service's website, which is weather.gov/FWD/Skywarn, to see if you have to pre-register for a class in a specific county in which you may want to attend. As a reminder, anyone can attend these classes in person for free, but if you can't make it to an in-person class, there are some virtual options you can sign up for. That's all we have for you on this week's episode of Weather Extra. Stay safe and warm throughout this upcoming week as another blast of Arctic air has arrived. We'll see you again next weekend for another 30 minutes of nothing but weather and science. Have a great week.